Mike, you wrote a very interesting column in Monday's morning newspaper. It was about Penn State Joe Paterno and some of his press conferences, basically all of his press conferences now, where he hasn't been as coherent as other years, where you guys would ask a question and he'd make you repeat it 3 times, and then we give you an answer that was so out to left field that it doesn't make any sense. And I want to ask you, as a writer, what made you write about that this week, and was it hard for you to decide how you should handle something like that?
It was very hard for me to decide, and I think it's going to continue. I think this is going to continue to be a story, and it's going to continue to be hard for me to figure out how to deal with it because I think clearly any reasonable person who has sat in on all of these press conferences and teleconferences that we do with him over the course of the year would say that it has become alarmingly difficult to communicate with him, alarmingly difficult to ask a question and have him hear/understand it, and then have him come up with a coherent answer. And as you said, some of the answers are just have no connection to the question. And you combine this with, there's a lot of things. You combine this with a lot of other little things, and you see the potential for deterioration here. And I almost hesitate to call it deterioration because then people can say that I'm spinning it. But I do think that we have an obligation, those of us who are covering the team and covering Joe Paterno, we have an obligation to share this stuff, to lay it out there and do so, I think, pretty dispassionately and pretty without putting any kind of spin on it or our take on it. That's what it is, and I sort of leave it up to you to decide what to do with that information.
It was a fine line. How do you balance between being the reporter, you're talking about this right now, the reporter, and balancing that with revealing information like this? Because you've taken some criticism of it. At the very beginning of the year, you were a person that took a lot of flack, and you got some national exposure when you revealed that Joe wasn't getting around as well as he used to. His mobility wasn't there. Even the way he drove a car when he left the lot, he's 83 years old, and he's slowed down a bit. And all you do is mention that in the column, like this isn't the same JoePa, and now you're bringing it up like this guy has, in the last 3 years, the last year, he's just not as coherent as he used to be, and not answering things as well as he used to, but maybe ought to be answering it. How do you balance that as a reporter?
It's a very, very difficult thing to do, and as I said, it's going to be something that I think I'm going to be dealing with going forward. There's lots of little things. This summer, this off season, he was not able to do a lot of the going around and talking to alumni groups that is sort of a standard thing for these big-time college coaches. He couldn't do that because of some sickness, antibiotic thing that he was on, and he stopped doing his radio show this year, which he has done forever, where people call in and basically genuflect to Joe. And it was hard for me to get from there to practice in time to do it. And they could change the time by half an hour or something. Mm-hmm. And again, you've been doing it forever. He doesn't travel to recruit anymore, and the reason given for that is, well, he gets mobbed. It becomes a public appearance. He's a rock star. Well, he's been a rock star for a long time, and he used to sort of embrace that because it was part of the gig of being a high-profile guy that people want to be attracted to. Mm-hmm. And we know that they've had trouble recruiting. So I think it's reasonable to look at all this. None of this stuff individually is that important. The radio show, who cares if he does a radio show? Who cares if he gives me a good quote? That's not that important. But together, it paints a picture. And again, I want to be very careful about not telling you what the picture says. Just lay it out there for you, and you decide what it says.